Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Monday, 1st of October, 2018. And I'm back in the southeast of England, looking over West London here from Epsom Downs. It's a beautiful morning and almost cloudless and very clear. I can see the planes stacking up across London coming into Heathrow. But this is really the first day of the first month of the full Stasi legislation being applied in the UK. Although that's a bit incorrect because it's not really legislation, it's the commercial courts. It's the commercial courts that are shutting down any kind of effective opposition. So the UK is very much now like Tiananmen Square was almost 30 years ago, where standing in front of a truck that is heading towards a frack site in the UK is going to get exactly the same reaction from the authorities as standing in front of a tank in Tiananmen Square did, say, back in the 1990, wasn't it? So, we are in very, very interesting times, and although there was pretty much a media blackout on reporting of the sentencing by Judge Oldham, a judge who over the previous 2 years has allowed at least two paedophiles to walk free from his court, and yet he sentences 3 peaceful environmental protesters to 15 and 16 months in jail. Something is not right with this picture, and certainly on social media and in discussions around the country, it's very clear that people are understanding the impact of this, and they are certainly finding it, very, very disturbing. And let me just say, if you're not disturbed by this sentencing, then you're really not paying attention, because this doesn't just apply to opposition against fracking. It's effectively setting a precedent that could now be applied against anyone who decides that they need to up the ante in terms of protest and step off the pavement, put down their placard, and do something that perhaps has a little bit more impact, such as slow walking a truck, climbing on a truck, or locking on, all of which, in the wider scheme of things, would cause a delay of, in most circumstances, no more than a few hours. And in fact, Quadrilla's management have acknowledged in a community liaison meeting that the industry expects to have to deal with protest. It says offshore, it's bad weather that caused delays. Onshore, it's protest. Yet, the commercial courts, where it's irrefutable that commerce has absolute precedence over human life and well-being, insist on establishing this raft of parliamentary law. And this raft of supra-parliamentary law, because there's nothing in parliamentary law which prevents peaceful protest. In fact, it's enshrined in the European Convention on Human Rights, and that then finds its way down into the Human Rights Act of 1998. Yet, the judges who act on behalf of the corporations decree that those rights are limited rights. And what they mean by limited rights is that they're limited to ensure that commerce is not in any way impeded, regardless of whether or not those commercial interests are detrimental to the environment or detrimental to the health and the well-being of those people who have the misfortune to live in the target zones, the sacrifice zones as the industry calls it. So tomorrow I shall be at the Rolls building, which is the Royal Courts at Fetter Lane, in the city, and the postcode is London EC4A1NL. And there are 2 injunctions being heard there tomorrow. One is the Angus injunction, and they're seeking to get the rubber stamp on their injunction that was granted at a secret hearing a few weeks ago on Balcombe and Brockham. And of course it's Brockham where there's re-injection occurring, and it is surmised that it is that re-injection that has effectively triggered the seismic events that the southeast has experienced since April the 1st. I think it's up to 12 seismic events now. But the unconventional gas industry says, whoa, nothing to do with us. No, just don't look here, keep moving along. Despite the fact that the epicenter seems to be at a depth of just 1 kilometer, which is extremely shallow for an epicenter of a seismic event. The other injunction being heard tomorrow, and this is the one that I should be challenging, is the IGAS injunction. And IGAS were assuming that no one was going to challenge this, so they had simply booked a 2-hour hearing at the court to get it rubber stamped. But it seems that with my challenge, it might take a little bit longer than 2 hours. So that part of the proceedings should be a directions hearing with a further date being set for a fuller hearing. So if you want to come along and see what's occurring and see how the commercial courts simply are not interested in any counter evidence, and in fact the process now that's being adopted is being effectively accelerated to discourage any opposition, so that these companies can simply go to the court and get their rubber stamps. Well, the stock price of these 2 companies might have risen a little bit on the prospect of these injunctions being put in place, but hey, you know what happens to those who take advantage of that. Meanwhile, at Horse Hill, it seems that UKOG are probably in need of a bit of extra cash, as they've issued a statement saying that basically they're looking at introducing production plans which will ultimately lead to the production of some 500 plus tons of oil from the well that was named the Gatwick Gusher by dodgy David Lenegas. And it's going to be interesting to see the effect of this. To say the likelihood is that UKOG just need a bit of cash, so they put out this kind of press statement to get the mug punters to part with their well-earned cash, on the basis that this time next year you'll be millionaires. Just hand your money over. But if UKOG do go ahead with these plans, then they're looking to increase the size of the pad at Horse Hill by about 25%, and also add another 2 wells to the 4 that they already have permission for. So those people who live in Hawley and Gatwick and all those villages just around that northern edge of Gatwick Airport, for 4 years now you've been living in denial. You've been trying to say, no, I'm not interested, I don't want to see what's going on up there. Well, if UKOG get their way, then the industrialization of your southeastern quarter of Surrey is about to become industrialized on a big way. But there's always opportunity to get involved and let the local authority know that you do not in any way approve of this industrialization of your area. And unfortunately, of course, it's all Tory held down there, and the Tory party work on the basis that you're all good Tories because you're all in debt up to your eyeballs, and that you have to work every hour God sends to feed your outrageous mortgage. So you're not going to argue, and the Tory party are extremely grateful for that, as of course are the unconventional gas industry. Meanwhile, I have to say that unfortunately the increase in the oil price, it's now actually pushing $80. I believe that Brent is now trading in excess of $80 a barrel. And unfortunately, this is probably a little bit above the point at which the exploration and exploitation of unconventional hydrocarbons almost becomes viable in this country. The fact that we don't have the expertise and it's just a bunch of cowboys is of course neither here nor there, because they're not going to be responsible for the cleanup costs. They're going to leave that to the taxpayer once they've done a runner and left the mess for everyone else to deal with. But that may be temporary. Of course, we're coming into what is forecast to be a harsh winter. It's the sort of perhaps the counter to the beautiful summer that we've just enjoyed, and so oil prices are being pushed higher on that expectation. Meanwhile, Hinkley C. In fact, the reason I bring this up is because I saw an article at the weekend which talked about the proposition to build a whole bunch of mini nuclear power stations around the country. Well, let's just talk about Hinkley C for a second and look at the absurdity of that. Because Hinkley C, the contract is that the British government has guaranteed that it will pay £92.50 per megawatt hour generated from Hinkley C. But power generation from Hinkley C is actually a byproduct. Of course, the real purpose is the production of military grade uranium and plutonium. And the current price of a megawatt hour is about £69 and a few pennies. So what's on offer to Hinkley C is something in the region of about 30% above market rate, because the British government desperately needs Hinkley C to sustain the arms industry so that it can keep selling obnoxious weaponry to the likes of Saudi Arabia and Israel, so that they can perpetrate their proxy wars wherever it is that they feel like it. And they rely, of course, on the British public's absolute apathy. Well, things are gathering pace. Over the next few weeks, we've got the injunction hearings in the London courts brought by IGAS and Angus. In the following week, we've got the hearings in Newcastle, where Gateshead Council have tried to gag Mark Steele from talking about his concerns of the implementation of 5G and LED streetlights in Gateshead. And last week, David Noakes was found guilty of making available an unlicensed medicine. But of course, what that doesn't tell you is that unlicensed medicine was never going to get licensed, because it is a proven, extremely effective cancer treatment, which the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority, which is effectively a government body working on behalf of Big Pharma, refuses to allow any kind of effective cancer treatment to come onto the market. So in November the 19th, at Southwark Crown Court, there will be a 2-day hearing, and that hearing will be to mitigate the sentences. And at that hearing, then cancer survivors who have benefited from GCMAF are expected to give evidence. So this is the corporatocracy that gone crazy. The next few weeks are going to clearly demonstrate that the corporations and the courts operating on behalf of the corporations do not have your well-being at heart. They are simply protecting the greed of a handful of people, and of course protecting the city state. Same in Washington, same in Rome. One looking after the religion, one looking after the military, and one looking after the finance. Anyway, if you can join me tomorrow at the Royal Courts at about 10 o'clock at Fetter Lane, that would be wonderful. So thanks very much, and I'll join you not tomorrow morning because I'll be at the courts, but on Wednesday at 8:30. You take care now.
didn't know if you were videoing that way, that way.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I was actually videoing this way, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Selfie. It was a video.
Yeah.